Hey, crafty babes. I am pulling you in here kind of mid project because, well, this was a little bit of a complicated one and I wasn't really sure if I was going to film it or not. So I decided once I kind of had a foothold on my layout and what I was going to do, I decided to bring you along. So here we are. What I have done, let me just catch you up a little bit. These photos are actually printed in photo strips. I used my template, or I made a template in InDesign and popped these photos into like a big grid, and then I just trimmed them vertically so that they all stayed in a vertical photo strip, and and then that way they're I could have done anything with them. And originally I had kind of had them a little bit wonky and kind of layered on top of each other, but ultimately I'm a grid girl and I I made sure they were all nice and lined up so that I could just have a nice structure. And so here what I'm doing is starting to stamp. I've got a title situation happening here where it's just going to say Suze and Dre, because this is a photo or a layout all about our adventures together and all of the things that we've done together as our friendship has began and evolved and is what it is. And we have done so many fun things together, that I just have all these memories, and there's definitely memories attached to each one of these photos that I wanted to try to capture. And all of the supplies that I'm using here are from the issue number 30 printables, the stamp, as well as the Sunshine Alpha stamps, and I will link those all in the description. There are, at the time I'm recording this, there are still Sunshine Alpha and number stamps in stock, as well as the Chasing Sunshine stamp, and then the issue number 30 digital files are always available, so those are always accessible. They don't sell out. So here I've got this left hand side where I'm just making this massive stamping cluster. So we have been friends for 6 years, so I wanted to make sure I used the number 6 from the Sunshine big numbers. And I'm using a combination of all of the colors from this issue. So just kind of trying to pull in the colors, that I've already kind of settled on where some of the ephemera clusters are going to be. So that's really helpful in knowing what colors to stamp, because usually stamping for me happens toward the end. Die cuts kind of happen first. So if you are opposite and you like to stamp first, then your die cuts, then you can stamp whatever you want, and your die cuts then can, be moved around color wise in order to kind of get that balance going. But here I'm kind of all over the place because I just have a lot to work with, and I have all these blank spaces, and so kind of if I feel like, oh, there's an empty space here that probably needs to be filled with something, then I'm going to do that. So, and I kind of messed up on this stamp. It didn't really go the way that I wanted, and so I end up just stamping on a piece of cardstock, and then I'm just gluing over it kind of like a mask, and it totally works. So that's one thing that's cool about stamping, is that I know a lot of people still can be a little bit nervous about stamping, especially if you're stamping right on your project. There's always a fix, you can always cover it up with something else, and like I did, I literally just covered it up with the same exact thing. I didn't have to change my mind or make a different decision. I just kind of had to patch it up a little bit, you know what I mean? And that's super helpful. So I'm also laying this magic mat from scrapbook.com underneath my pages as I'm stamping, because I don't have a flat surface. I'm working in my fringe notebook, which means there's a whole lot of stuff going on underneath on that left side. So just to make sure that my stamping turns out good, that I get a nice clean stamp impression, I'm using something solid underneath. And you don't have to use this product. You can use like a book, or just something flat that has a hard surface. Works perfect. So here I'm starting to layer now on top of these photos. So where I find some blank, like negative space within each photo, I can put like a little cluster, little labels, and I've got my labels from this issue. I've got them printed in a mini size, so I basically printed them 50% in order to have some variety in the size, and that has allowed me to use them on these in these smaller areas here. So that's very helpful too. And then of course you always got to have like a fun cluster of words. And another cool thing that I'm using is Susanna's stamp, that's all about friendship. So she's got a lot of fun words and sentiments that are just perfect for when you're documenting about someone who, you know, is like your BFF forever. This stamp here that I'm using is my Memory Lane stamp, which has just different sentiments too about, you know, looking back on things. And even though our friendship is current, there's so much history, you know, in our memories that some of these sentiments in that stamp also work really well. That stamp, unfortunately, has been sold out for a while, but if you have it, it's a really good one. I've got already some other die cuts like hanging around, you know, in all these different clusters. So the stamping ends up being kind of the last part for me, because it adds that it's the journaling for me. It's how I journal, because I don't my layouts and pages are typically not very journaling heavy. They're not story driven. And so that's why I use stamps the most, is because they end up using the words to tell the story for me. And that just works out sometimes. So let's see, what is next? I'm just kind of fishing around for more sentiments to go on certain places. I've got some extra room on some of these photos, so I'm just making the most of it. It to me, I'm trying to make sure it doesn't feel over cluttered. And one way that I did that in the beginning was by making sure that these photos were all black and white. I originally did print them all in color, and then when I put them on a page, I just knew there was no way I could keep it from looking super cluttered. So by turning them all black and white, it almost, you know, it neutralizes them. It brings the colors out of your supplies. And so that is something that, you know, you can consider if you're working on a layout with a lot of different photos, and if the colors are clashing and making it feel like you don't have a consistent color theme, make them black and white. It's so classic. It actually hides a lot of imperfections, and you know, it's a great way to make the color the focus, you know, and while still being able to focus on the photo. So I'm adding some little mini hearts, chopping off some edges here of things I've you know, let hang over the edge, and we are pretty close to done here. I'm not sure I add much more at this point. I think this is well, maybe I do. But I am, oh yeah, you know what? I've got a little bit more space up here at the top. So yeah, I am adding a bit more, just stamping. And I do leave a little bit blank here because like there's no place for your eye to rest really. And so I wanted to just make sure that I had, you know, some room for the viewer to like rest and not have to be bombarded with looking at everything. So I just make a small little, couple little extra things. I've got this Everyday Explorers Co. stamp where it says my person, so I'm stamping that or trying to figure out where to put it. And pretty much not going to do much else over here on this left hand side. So I'm stamping it in yellow because you know, again, I'm kind of deciding what colors need to be filled in there a little bit. And I will have another label hang off the edge here and then another circle to kind of bring that circle in from the top. And then that is kind of it. I'm trying to figure out here if I want it clustered on top of everything or hanging off the edge, and I decided to give a little bit more breathing room, hang it off the edge, and call it done. Got it. Of course, gotta use a couple more hearts, and There are a couple of extra little things, like I need to stamp the date and fill that in, so we're going to use this mini, boy, I have tried to find this stamp and it's like it just doesn't exist anymore. It is a mini roller date stamp. The size is 00, and I've had it for probably 5 or 6 years. I've never been able to find it again, but you can use whatever date stamp you want. So thank you guys so much for being here and watching. I hope that you've gained a little bit of inspiration here, and I hope that you go out and document a very special relationship to you, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.